And we are now live, and I want to welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Community Relations Corner, where we discuss issues of concern to New York's Jewish community and our friends, partners, neighbors all around the New York metropolitan area. I'm your host, Michael Miller, the Executive Vice President and CEO of the JCRC of New York, the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. And on each episode of the Community Relations Corner, we're joined by guests representing the political, religious, economic, and diverse community leadership in New York, many of whom I've had the honor of getting to know during the course of my tenure at JCRC-NY. Together, we'll discuss current events impacting the New York Jewish community and its neighbors, as well as the state of our city, the state of our state, the state of the nation, and even at times the state of the world. First, a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor for this episode is the Free Synagogue of Flushing, serving the Reformed Jewish community in Queens, New York for over a century. Visit freesynagogueflushing.org for information about their Shabbat and holiday services, weekly Sunday school, and the beautiful spaces available for public rental. Once again, please visit freesynagogueflushing.org. And today we're excited, very excited, to continue our Black History Month series with our two very special guests, the New York State Majority Leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, and the New York State Assembly Speaker, Carl E. Heastie. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Hi, Michael. Good to
Wonderful
be here.
to see you. And you both look terrific. And I hope all is well. It looks like in the speaker's background, he has his chamber. So a little bit of Albany has come down to the Bronx likely, but it's a pleasure to have you both with us. And I know that the Majority Leader is in her district as well, up in Westchester. The first thing I like to do in Community Relations Corner is get to know who my guests are. And what our viewers should know who you are as well. So just a little bit of your background as to what brought you into public service, particularly to run in an election to become an elected official in state government. Again, first starting with the Majority Leader.
Well, thank you. And first of all, thank you so much for all that you do, Michael, all that JCRC does for all of our communities. And it's just such an honor to be here. And again, thank you for the recognition of Black History Month. For me, I grew up in New York City. I grew up in the housing projects in Manhattan and the Bronx. I very often tell the story of my parents who were limited in their ability to succeed because of the color of their skin. My dad was a World War II veteran, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, but the GI Bill didn't apply to him when he got out. His abilities to live where he wanted, to get housing and employment weren't there. So, but he was an amazing man. My mom also, incredible woman, typed 100 words a minute, but corporations didn't hire Black people and didn't have to. And so she was limited as well in what she could be, although she did wind up as the head of the steno pool for the Corporation Council of New York City. Again, civil service. But the reality is that I had no reason to think I would be anything other than what I saw. And however, I did grow up in the 60s, and I have been part of seeing an incredible evolution of consciousness. And when I moved to Westchester County, when I moved to Yonkers, my family and I moved in the middle, in the beginning, frankly, of a desegregation battle. We moved here in the late 1970s, 79, and in the 80s, the NAACP was fighting to desegregate Yonkers, a place that I didn't know was segregated. And I became involved in the desegregation, supporting a mayor who wanted to desegregate, as many people did not. And it was my involvement with the effort to desegregate the schools, the housing, as well as protect the future of children like mine, to be able to go to a school that would and give them the opportunities they should have. That's how I got involved. The mayor, when he won, asked me to join his administration, and the rest, as we say, is history.
Oh, well, that's quite a story. I'm going to turn to the speaker to just share with us a little bit about his background. Mr.
So I
Speaker?
don't know if I can tell such as a good a story as the majority leader. So I'll give, I'd say, more of an amusing story. I had always been interested in, I'd say, in public service and politics. As a child, I'd sit and watch, the election results with my parents, particularly my mother, who was a member of the same Democratic club that I'm a member of now. And every time that I ran for, I'd say, class president, I lost. I lost so badly that I'm not even sure that I voted for myself. But I didn't let that deter me. But I really think I got my political bones, I'd say, when I went to Stony Brook University, and I got pretty involved in student activities. I became chair of, it doesn't exist anymore, but it was part of the Student Activities Board, but it was called the Minority Planning Board. And I was responsible for the programming of all of the different, I'd say, ethnic groups, different organizations that weren't part of, I'd say, the mainstream Student Activities Board. And then when I graduated from Stony Brook, I came home, I got involved locally. And then in 2000, I had the opportunity to run for the Assembly. And then in 2009, I became the Bronx Democratic County Chair, which I think had a lot to do with showing my Assembly colleagues that I could bring together people of different races, gender, from different backgrounds to get onto the same page. Most people know, the Bronx is not the I'd say the friendliest political battleground, and so I was able to unite I'd say the Italian population, the Jewish population, the African American population, Latino population. And I think that was a big reason why, when there was a vacancy, I was able to convince my colleagues to give me a chance to become the first person of color to ever hold this position
Right.
in Assembly. And for me, and I'll just end this, knowing that, Andrea and I are not only two history makers, but it's great. It's Black History Month, but I don't think either one of us, are doing these jobs just because, we are Black. I was very proud and emotional the day she was voted a majority leader. And, we have the distinction of being the only two right now in the entire country to lead legislative houses.
Wow, that's extraordinary. So, Mr. Speaker, what obstacles, as we mark Black History Month, what obstacles due to your racial identity have you encountered in your rise to become the Speaker of the Assembly? And I'll ask the same question, of course, of the Majority Leader, who's not only the first African American, I think you're the first woman to serve in that position as well. But first, Mr. Speaker, what obstacles?
I think that the normal travails that any Black man has, dealt with, and I think that's why when you saw so many of the incidences, particularly, we saw over last summer with Mr. Floyd, it's when you see things like that as a Black man, you say, that could be me or could have been me. And so those things have been, been very meaningful. I do think that sometimes as an African American, we do have to show that we're better than just better than what people expect. I do think that there is, certain times where people assume that we're not as good or as smart as those others. So those, I think, are the challenges, that that I've had. When I first became speaker, I had a member of the press ask me, did I know what Medicaid was? Now here
Ooh.
I have an MBA in finance.
Huh.
Before I was elected, I worked in the controller's office as a budget analyst, and I actually had a reporter ask me, do I know what is Medicaid? So.
Oh my God. All right, Majority Leader.
I guess you should be happy that you weren't asked whether you were on it. I think, unfortunately, those stereotypes do come. And, I'm the first woman leader in the history of New York State. And it was interesting that people, when I began, some of the reporters were that, I was, I guess, the proxy for, I think, Eric Adams at that time. He was still in the Senate, or, name whoever man they wanted to suggest that I was kind of the face and that somebody else was really the brain or the activity. And those are the assumptions. But I also know that anytime people who are not usually seen in positions get an opportunity, it usually is contextualized in very difficult circumstances up until then.
Right.
So, before I was elected, there were people, and the speaker had the same thing, ethical breaches, a lot of negativity around what the operations were and so on. And it allowed for people who would normally do the same things to look at doing things a little bit different. And that's when opportunities very often arise for women and for people of color. And I am happy that I had a conference, and still do, of enlightened people who are willing to take a chance on, doing something incredibly different and seeing how it works out. And I also know that because of the skin I'm in and the gender that I have, when I get an opportunity to do that, it is incumbent, and I'm sure the speaker feels the same way, incumbent upon us to really make sure that although we're the first, we're not the last, and to dispel a lot of the mythology, a lot of the whatever it is that would allow people to hold other people back as opposed to allowing them to contribute in the way that they can.
Right. It's mythology, it's stereotyping. And in fact, we in the Jewish community, regrettably, have suffered from that as well. But within the framework of the Jewish community and the Black community, Black-Jewish relations have evolved over the years. Maybe at its height, it was during the civil rights movement. You referenced the 60s earlier. So it was during that time frame that the marches took place in the South, and Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel are walking arm in arm in Selma, Alabama, among many other images, where Schwimmer, Cheney, and Goodman being murdered. Where are we today? I know that you both have relationships with members of the Jewish community, and up in Westchester, certainly, Majority Leader, you're very well known as partnering with our Jewish community up in that county. What is the status from your perspective of the relationship between the Black and Jewish communities today? Are we getting back to where we were back in the 60s? Have we overcome that? And can we overcome hatred together?
It's hard to say where we are anymore, because, it's just such an incredible, I think, exposition in many ways of a lot of things that people have been able to believe weren't the case. And now we know, especially sadly, over the past 4 years, we've seen the range of anti-Semitism in numbers that I don't think anybody's seen,
Correct.
Before, but obviously also, anti-Black, anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, you name it. We have all had an opportunity now to see the many faces and degrees of hatred attacking almost everybody. So I hope that this allows all of us, quite honestly, to reset in terms of who we are as human beings. All of us with our very difficult histories, certainly the Jewish community, Black community, so many, we've been there. We've been kind of at the baseline of understanding how hatred, leads to genocide and extermination and dehumanization and marginalization in ways in this, in this reality that we don't want to see happen again. So I am hoping and continue to move towards a resetting of our our sense of humanity. And I think the way that the speaker and I have worked in terms of even the legislation, it is very clear that when it comes to protecting the Jewish community, and trying to make sure that we have no toleration for hate, doing the kinds of legislation that supports a more robust educational, cultural, and religious informational system, and really just pushing the ball forward. I think we're resetting, and I'm hoping again that that everything that we're looking at hopes all of us to reset, because as Dr. King says, you can legislate to keep people from doing bad things, but you can't legislate a person's heart. So through example, through legislation, and through our continued partnership, I think is how we do it.
All right, thank you, Majority Leader. Turning to the speaker, I want to tweak the question a little bit. I was looking at the virtual background behind you. It kind of reminds of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C., and what took place on January 6th, and that horrific insurrection. Yesterday, we learned that of a Capitol police officer, African-American, who broke down in tears for 15 minutes. He was crying that he was called the N-word 15 times. How personally has, for you as a lawmaker, as the recent rise in extremism, there was so much hate among the mob that was attacking our Capitol. What can we draw from that to once again bring our two communities together, our communities that have both suffered from racism and from anti-Semitism, to bring us together, as the Majority Leader was speaking of, to ensure tolerance for all?
I think when you look at the Black community and the Jewish community, and not to compare or say that our situations were worse than anyone else's, but the history, how history has treated African American people and Jewish people, I think has been a natural reason why that we should be very close allies. The oppression, I'd say the segregation, the anti-Semitism, the racial discrimination, the racial hate that is spewed at us. When people put the swastika on doors, it's meant to make Jewish people feel the same way we feel when we get called the N-word, or someone hangs a noose somewhere. So I just think there's a natural place for our communities to be allies. And as the Majority Leader said, we've always been very conscious of trying to make sure that we are very, respectful of things. I could just give you a quick example of what I mean about being respectful. Sometimes the natural calendar of things falls on different days. And when we made changes to the election law cycle, we realized that the filing of petitions was going to fall on Passover. And Andrea and I both said that, we want to make sure that we are very respectful to our Jewish brothers and sisters.
Thank you.
We changed the schedule to be respectful of that. And so that's what, Andrea meant when the Majority Leader meant when she says that, throughout our legislative workings, we are always mindful and respectful of the Jewish community and doing right and making sure that everybody's treated fairly. Now, I circled the airport for a while. Let me answer your question about what, we witnessed on January 6th. I think what we witnessed is something that is still very live and well in this country. There's still a huge number of people in this country who like to spew hate, who don't like anybody who doesn't look like they do or worship the way that they do, and that is still a problem. And a lot of times we think, because we had a Black president and we had a Jewish vice presidential candidate that we've overcome. We've advanced, but we still haven't overcome. When people feel that they can take that type of hatred and really, there is no bigger symbol of democracy and the freeness of the world than the U.S. Capitol. And for people to try to take that, it's hurtful to me. The Confederate flag had never been flown in the Capitol, and someone was able to walk in carrying a Confederate flag into the U.S. Capitol. So that's what, that day. So I can understand what that police officer broke down in tears, because for me to see the Confederate flag inside the Capitol, there's a message every time somebody carries that flag.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think that all three of us understand and know that what unchecked hatred can lead to. You have both been in Israel. I've had the pleasure of accompanying the speaker on his trip, and I look forward someday to accompanying you, the majority leader. But I know that you've both been to the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, the Yad Vashem, and that's what unchecked hatred led to, the murder of 6 million of our brothers and sisters, men and women. But their hatred wasn't only, the Nazi hatred was not only of Jews, but it was on all those who were not like them. And that no doubt would have included.
We went on the list. The monkeys from Africa was next on the list. And Michael, let me just tell you, I want to thank you for that trip. I always admitted to you, I wasn't sure I really wanted to go, because I'm the type of person that, if it's not work, if I'm away from home for 4 days, I get homesick. But I have to tell you, that is one of the greatest experiences of my life.
Thank you.
Going to on that trip. And I have to say, one of the most touching moments was, and I still talk about this often, is looking at the shoes of the victim in that museum. It just kind of brought everything that the people went through in the Holocaust. It just brought it like right in front of your face. It's such an emotional experience to see those shoes.
Yeah, and Majority Leader, do you want to weigh in on your trip to Israel?
And thank you, Michael. And I too, my trip to Israel, changed. Well, I won't say. I mean, I usually travel with an open mind, but one never knows what they're going to experience. But the experiences that I had during that trip and the understanding that I garnered stays with me always. I was just thinking though that education is so important. We and the opportunity to speak out with an educated and informed viewpoint and understanding is almost mandatory. And I think we see it again and again. When good people stay silent, when bad things happen, you are actually part of the bad thing. And I know there's been people who have said it much more eloquently than I've said it. But the reason why people were able to be incinerated and murdered was because so many good people sat there and watched it happen and pretended that it wasn't them. Right. And so as long as we feel like it's okay to ignore things that are eroding our society, eroding our democracy, eroding other people's rights, eroding their humanity, as long as we think it's okay because it's not us, we are always on the brink of having, yet another horrible historic memory that we can prevent.
Thank you. And speaking of erosion within society, criminal justice reform has been at the forefront of legislation on the state level, of course, on the federal level as well. Speaker Heastie, first, what are some of your accomplishments and goals with regard to criminal justice reform and the relationship with the police department? The police department, particularly when the expression defund the police is used, really is very uncomfortably heard on Jewish ears because we depend upon the police for our safety and our security. So how far has criminal justice reform gone within the assembly, and where do you want it to go? One of our viewers asked a question about solitary confinement, but I'll leave that up to you as to how you want to answer the question.
So, criminal justice reform was something that I said when I got elected speaker was something that was very, very important to me, and was one of the things that I wanted to tackle. And I thank the majority leader for being a partner in doing that. As one house bill is just a one house bill. It doesn't happen unless both houses passed it. But I think for the experience of me as a Black man and growing up in the Bronx, the scales of justice and Lady Justice is supposed to be blind, but I'm not sure that was. Well, I shouldn't say I'm not sure. I'm sure that was not always the case. And all I tried to do is try to strive for a system that judged you more on who you were, what you're accused of, and not just to punish you based on the color, of your skin. If you are a perpetrator of crime, it shouldn't matter what color you are. It shouldn't matter how much money your family has in the eyes of the law. And in many cases, that was the problem. So that was the main thing that we wanted to tackle. I just wanted to have a more fair and just system, because sometimes, even when they're perpetrators of a crime, there's victims on both sides. We want people to be rehabilitated, and if people do harmful things, they should, pay for those things. But families on both sides are victims as well. So we just wanted to have a system that just treated everybody as equal, as possible. And you mentioned, solitary confinement. That is something that is a very serious utilization of in the prison and jail system, and it's something that I don't think is necessarily is a useful tool as some in law enforcement think there is. I think there's better ways to deal with that. I don't think that people were built to be solitary. We're not solitary beings. And I do think time spent alone can do a lot to someone's mental capacity. So, I've long been in favor of looking at changes, to that.
All right, thank you. Majority Leader, you wanted to weigh in on this too, didn't you?
Well, I don't think I think it's very clear that that the justice system does not work the same way for everyone. And again, if there was any doubt about that, I think this sad COVID period has again allowed us to see a lot about a lot, and has even given us the time, frankly, to be able to actually absorb what we are seeing. So it would be a shame to not take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to us, both in our unique positions with the experiences that we've had as Black people growing up in this system, to try, now that everybody's paying attention, to try and make sure that the criminal justice system is indeed fair and impartial. And we don't want criminals to be able to be criminals without any repercussions. But nobody wants to see people who are going to be criminalized because of poverty, or criminalized because of the color of their skin, or criminalized because of anything other than, their alleged crime.
Well, you referenced, thank you very much, but you referenced COVID, and we can't avoid the subject matter. The pandemic has impacted all of us in so many different ways. Madam Majority Leader, the exacerbated inequality in our society when it comes to healthcare disparities is something which is very, very troubling. What can at the state level, what can be done to improve access to quality healthcare for all? And as I mentioned that, just that the both of you should please know that we've established a interfaith coalition around the issue of healthcare disparity. And it's very important. We started in the borough of Brooklyn, but nonetheless, we hope to be able to spread that throughout the city. But the healthcare disparities are really very palpable. What can the state Senate do? And we'll turn next to the Speaker for the State Assembly.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you, because one of the things we can do is just do what you're doing, making sure that not only we establish programs that recognize the disparities, but we actually do recognize the disparities and do something about it. And so, whether it's the environmental effects of urban settings. I grew up in, as I said, in public housing because we were relegated to public housing. And in public housing, they burnt garbage all day long, and I wheezed all day long, and nobody connected the two.
Right.
So, we cannot continue to pretend, again, that we don't know what we know. And so I'm perfectly happy to, examine the disparities. But when you look at maternal mortality, which again, we have done, and continue to do aggressive work in examining maternal mortality, and certainly Black women, are more likely to die during childbirth as well as infants. So we know what we have to do. We have to give, more cultural and educational training to our medical professions. We've got to make sure that that hospitals, and places, primary care is available and giving equal treatment and equal access. And we have to, we really have to push the envelope. And obviously with this COVID, making sure that there are vaccine sites in communities of color who are being disparately impacted. We've got to make sure that access is there and that the education is there. There's a lot that we could do and a lot that we continue to do.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, are there legislative remedies?
Well, just as we talk about, we want to have a fair and just criminal justice system. We want to have a fair and just, health system,
Healthcare system.
And I do think that this pandemic has put a magnifying glass on what we already knew was the problem that communities of color are quite often disproportionately affected in terms of access to healthcare. A lot of the long-term illnesses, are dominated predominated, I should say, communities of color. And so in our, different responsibilities, we want to try to continue to shed light on that and try to fight to get equitable service. Again, your medical, I just believe that this country should give you, three things should be guaranteed to us: an education, healthcare, and the ability to be happy. And so, we'll just continue to try to push to make sure that people of color, have the same level of healthcare as everyone else.
Thank you.
I wanted to say one thing. Again, I think education is at the key of all of this, too.
Yes.
Because if we're not improving the systems that educate people so that they can rise in these healthcare professions, and, I think we just need to look at making sure that everybody, no matter what zip code you're in, actually has the kind of education that you need. Because I think if we get that, we will be able to deal with a lot of the other, things that are connected to people not knowing what they can know and need to know in order to, survive better.
Right. So we're living through extraordinary times, and during extraordinary times, you do extraordinary things. So I know that let's say emergency powers were granted to the governor this year. Is that something which is potentially going to be revisited, or do you think that we're coming out of the pandemic and we don't necessarily have to do that?
Well, I think when people say the governor was granted, extra powers, I think people have to kind of understand what the powers the governor has during a normal time, what powers has once he or she declares a state of emergency, and what are the things that we actually granted the governor. So I'll kind of sum it up really quickly. Once the governor declares a state of emergency, the governor has the ability to change and put to halt statutes and laws. He can't create new laws, but that is something that the governor already has. So when people say that we gave the governor, these huge powers, I think that's a little bit of a stretch of what we did. But what we did do was give the governor the ability to make directives. And we think during a pandemic, in my opinion, 62 different, well, I shouldn't say there's 58 if you count the city's 5 counties as one, 58 different health departments trying to deal with a pandemic, didn't make a lot of sense at that time. There should really be, one, place trying to coordinate for everyone. And so that's kind of what we did. And I'm not sure people know that any executive order that the governor issued, the Assembly and the Senate had the right to stop it, dead in its tracks by just issuing a concurrent, resolution. And so every system perfect? No. Are there things we can make, this stuff better or make the legislature feel more inclusive? I'm sure that those are conversations that, we will have with the Senate.
Okay. I want to shift to food justice. And we've talked about healthcare.
I think Andrea wanted to say something. Did I do good enough for both of us on that, or?
No, I think that was fine, and I think that we continue, just so you know, the power to create directives expires in April of 2021, and so it's not forever, and we are able to examine it, and do.
Okay, thanks. Well, again, thank you both on that. But food justice, we talked about healthcare disparities. Once again, what can be done? We're seeing it throughout the city. We have a coalition entitled Interfaith United at the JCRC, and the subject matter that these 25 or so interfaith organizations are working on is food justice. We've had a webinar in Queens. We just had a webinar in Brooklyn. We're moving over to the other boroughs as well, and we also encompass Long Island. We have an office there, and we have our affiliate Westchester Jewish Council that the majority leader is familiar with up in Westchester. But food justice is really at the heart of what people are suffering through during this pandemic because of the economic stress. Once again, Madam Majority Leader, is there a legislative remedy or anything that the state Senate and then the state Assembly can do to address food injustice?
Yes, we have been, we are continuing to do that. I think we just passed something just in the past few months that I think certainly my district started pushing, which is when supermarkets are finished with their food. Senator Harcum was carrying it here. I think Assemblyman Abbinanti did it there. But now they have to make this food available to local community groups. So again, that's a legislation so that all this stuff isn't tossed out, that people can actually get it. We've also, strengthened the ties between our farmers upstate by funding them, our farmers upstate, so that they will be able to bring their produce and not, just get rid of their produce, bring their produce to food deserts where it can be, distributed better. We have also made sure that we put millions of dollars into, again, food banks. And we have to give a shout out to my food bank, the food, Feeding Westchester and all over, that are doing, incredible things so we can bolster that money. As well as we had a special push, and I know the assembly as well, to make sure that kosher food, when we're giving out food, that we're not ignoring the needs of certain communities. And
hopefully fresh kosher food as opposed to frozen.
Well, yes, hopefully. But, I just want to make sure that that I had a lot of senators, including Senator Goodnardis, and so many, who were making sure that we understood the needs of, the community, and, with pushing for funding like that. So there were a lot of legislative things in terms of policy, in terms of encouraging, our farmers to think globally, and as well as allowing our own food distribution to be a little more robust.
Hey, Mr. Speaker, do you want to address that, please?
Well, I think for us, particularly throughout this pandemic, when people were struggling, people lost their jobs, people were worrying about housing and all these other issues. That was a huge priority of a need for people to be able to make sure that they could eat and had food for their children. And that's something that we want to continue to push. And I know there were a lot of organizations, including some that you are closely associated with, that was very good to a lot of places in the Bronx. Even here in my assembly district, we did multiple food giveaways to some of the housing developments and some of the places that really needed that. So I think, one of the things I'd say, if you want to look for the silver lining in the cloud, was
please
saw people step up, for each other, to make sure that we checked on people. We made sure that people had food. Sometimes people went shopping, for those who couldn't go out, some of our seniors and our neighbors and things like that. So I think that was one of the more, I'd say, the heartfelt things that I saw, that the desire for people to step up and make sure that their brothers and sisters of their own community and different communities.
Correct. Yeah, no, that's very, very important. I spent a lot of time with you, and I'm so grateful that you spent a lot of time with me and with us. And I just want to ask one last question, and that you both stepped into the world of politics and elected office. If there's somebody who's viewing this program and might be interested in running for elected office, what advice would you give them? One of the questioners in the Q&A function here asked for people of color. How do people of color enter into the political arena? Yes, true for people of color, but true for people of all different colors, just to make sure that we have a participatory democracy. What should they be doing? What advice would you have for them? We'll start with Majority Leader and then turn to the Speaker.
Well, I said, sometimes it's just a matter of being involved in your local community. You can't save the world if you haven't figured out what's important in your own space. So your involvement, whether it's with your neighborhood association, your homeowners association, your synagogue, your church, there are things to do everywhere. And if you are if you feel a passion and you think there's something that isn't getting done, then absolutely step up. We need your voice, and connect yourself with like-minded people. It's always good because I had a friend, Lois Bronze, who said that, if you think you're leading, if you're marching and nobody's following you, that you are not leading a parade, you are actually taking a walk in the park. So what you need to do is make sure that you can actually get people to follow you. And I will say that this environment has really given opportunities where there have never been opportunities before. we are listening to our young people in ways that wouldn't have happened, before now. I mean, they're leading an environment, they're leading in gun legislation, in Black Lives Matter. I mean, and we are paying attention to these young voices. And so we have to understand that now it is a very rich environment for leadership, real leadership, but also I would tell people, if you just want to have a vanity project, if you just want to get your name out, if you just think it'll be fun to do, don't do it. It is a serious piece of business, and we are in critical times. We need your best, and we want it for the right reasons.
Thank you for that uplifting message. Mr. Speaker.
My advice is don't do it. No, I'm just kidding.
Stay home.
But I will say, yeah, go do something that'll make you a lot of money that you could be helpful to community. But in all seriousness, public service, I don't think there's a greater gift that you could bestow on your community than public service. It's more enriching to me than money, being able to make the world a better place, for your neighbors. But I would just say, follow your passion. And I think if your passion is child advocacy, let that be what leads you to wanting to make your community a better place. I would just say whatever it is that your passion. It could be education, it could be homelessness, it could be all of the things we mentioned before, healthcare. Follow your passion. And I think oftentimes when you become a community leader, following your passion, that when those openings happen, or sometimes people do challenge incumbents, you will see the community will tap you on the shoulder. Because sometimes these decisions aren't just you sitting in a room by yourself and saying, you know what, I'm going to run for office. A lot of times, as the majority leader said, you have people behind you saying, you know what, we look at you as a leader, we want to follow you, and we want to support you, in your efforts to become elected.
All right. Thank you so much for that response. Thanks to both of you, Majority Leader Stewart-Cousins and Speaker Heastie, for spending so much time with us on Community Relations Corner. I'm going to offer a word of thanks to our sponsor and then turn to both of you for a last word. So this episode is sponsored by the Free Synagogue of Flushing, serving the Reformed Jewish community in Queens, New York for over a century. Visit freesynagogueflushing.org to learn about a wide array of programming, and the beautiful sanctuary, social hall, and meditation garden are available for rent. Visit freesynagogueflushing.org to learn about their Shabbat and holiday services and weekly Sunday school. Once again, visit freesynagogueflushing.org. Our thanks to their president, Ed Schauder, member of our board, Alan Bravo, their cantor and executive director, and Rabbi Jeffrey Gale. My thanks to my production team, our chief operating officer, Noam Gilboard, and his program associate, Rebecca Grossman, and Jennifer Glick, who's handling the technology. Also a shout out, I saw that Assemblywoman Taylor Darling is on the show, is watching. So a wave from the speaker and from the majority leader. And I'm going to turn it back to our two special guests. This is very unique that all three of us grew up in the Bronx. So this is like a homecoming.
Some of us stayed, some of us
stayed. Let me first turn to the majority leader for a last word, and then to you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, so if I had stayed, we'd have probably been, fighting each other, because I live in your district,
That's right.
But again, this has been an incredible pleasure, and I just thank JCRC for everything that you do and you continue to do. I know that we will all emerge from this time better because of our real concentration on making things better. That's what you do. And I couldn't have better partners than, the speaker. And like I said, I just think at the end of this, we will all be stronger, and our relations one to the other will also have really been knitted well together. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'd just like to say thank you to you, Michael, to JCRC for having me, for celebrating Black history. We believe Black history is American history, and Black history is every day. So I want to thank you. I want to say to your listeners and everyone, and I'd say the Zoomers who are watching us as well. Stay safe. Continue to check in on your neighbors. There is a light at the end of this tunnel. It is coming, and hopefully soon that we can all be together again and not have to use technology to spend time with one another.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. I'm Michael Miller, the Executive Vice President and CEO of the JCRC, and I want to thank the Majority Leader, the Honorable Andrea Stewart-Cousins, New York State Senate, and the Speaker, Carly Heastie of the New York State Assembly. Thank all of our viewers and look forward to joining with us again on the next episode of Community Relations Corner. Shalom to all. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Oh,
Yeah.
bye.